So our main guy Fanning is a 28-year-old dude who somehow gets dragged into this event called Goo. He has absolutely zero clue how he got picked or why the universe decided to prank him like this. He basically gets hit with a cosmic rewind button and wakes up as a teenager. He opens his eyes and realizes he is stuck right in the middle of a classroom. He is surrounded by all his old friends and classmates. The whole situation hits him with a massive wave of nostalgia. After remembering all the drama he left behind, he decides he's done with school and just wants to head back to his regular daily routine. Walking down the street, he spots a guy staring at a wanted poster on a house wall showing a sketchy criminal. The guy on the poster looks like bad news, but Fanning barely cares since his brain is totally checked out. The shock of seeing his old life hits hard when he gets home, but he really loses it when he sees Jin, his little sister, standing there. Seeing his parents healthy and the whole family back together makes him incredibly happy. He thinks this is his one big shot to actually fix his future. He wants to make better life choices this time, so he decides to kick things off during a family dinner. Fanning tells his dad he wants to take the martial arts exam, which is a massive deal in this weird world. Martial artists are basically celebrities with superpowers here. His dad is shocked, but immediately backs him up and hands over an old book to help him study, so he can start his training. But Fanning knows that just reading books isn't going to cut it. He needs special resources, like those sketchy energy pills that influencers are always trying to hawk in their videos. Even though they're broke, his parents act like supportive fight parents and scrape together every cent they have to buy him those pills. The next day at school, the teacher tells everyone that Fanning signed up for the martial arts exam. His classmates start talking trash, saying that only rich kids or natural-born prodigies should bother wasting their money on that kind of stuff. But our guy doesn't give a damn about their petty opinions. Then the teacher drops the news that a famous martial artist named Wang is coming to the school for a talk. The class loses their minds, and surprisingly, Fanning's group gets assigned to go find Wang and bring him in. The protagonist thinks this is a perfect chance to meet a real powerhouse. That night, Fanning remembers that every serious fighter uses those special pills his parents sacrificed so much to buy for him. He figures he should probably use them to buff up. He chugs them down, but suddenly his vision goes wonky, and he gets pulled into an alternate world where a digital screen pops up. Looking at the floating numbers, he realizes the pills turned into points he can use to level up his stats through various tests. He spends a few points and instantly feels like he just left the gym. Hyped up, he drops 10,000 points just to move up a tiny fraction of a level. He realizes he has a literal cheat code and decides to build his entire training around this evolution system. However, leveling up that fast catches the attention of people who can sense Kai, which is basically the internal battery of a martial artist. That includes the long-haired criminal from the poster he saw. The next few days are chill until it's finally time for Fanning and his crew to go hunting for Master Wang. When they find him, the master checks Fanning out and notes that his level is actually matching the top-tier talent of his age group. Everyone is stunned, and Wang gives his speech at school without any drama, but Fanning still has things to do after class. His family asked him to check in with his aunt about something important. He heads over to her place and gives the door a knock. A guy with long hair answers. Fanning doesn't know him, and the dude claims the aunt moved out a while ago. Fanning asks to look around, and the guy lets him in, but as he's browsing, he starts getting some really bad vibes. That long hair looks way too familiar. Suddenly, he remembers the wanted poster, and his heart starts hammering. He tries to play it cool and act like nothing is wrong. Thinking fast, he remembers Wang told him to send a secret SOS signal if he ever got into a jam. The criminal senses something is off and shouts that he recognizes Fanning's energy right before he lunges at him for the kill. The panic button is officially pressed. Fanning's phone goes off, and he picks up just as Wang rolls through the door to save the day. A split second later, the criminal attacks with insane speed, trashing the plan before Fanning can even blink. The guy attacks because Fanning snitched on his location, but Wang reveals he actually came to town specifically to hunt this dude down. He didn't think he'd find him this fast. After knocking the guy out, they go find Fanning's aunt, who is a total wreck. She is pretty shaken up. She explains she rented the room to the guy without knowing he was a fugitive, and only figured it out when she saw his face on a poster. The cops show up, haul the guy away, and start going through all his shady gear. They find a box of pills used for boosting physical stats and combat skills. Wang and Fanning decide to split the loot. The master takes 3 and lets Fanning have the rest of them. He warns him that these are level 3 pills and Fanning is still a level 1 noob. He says if he takes them all at once, they could seriously wreck his body. To keep him safe, Wang explains how to take them without exploding. He says they boost energy and blood, and some are specifically for climbing the ranks. But he has to take them slowly and keep up with his training. His body needs to get used to the power, or the damage might be permanent. Afterward, Wang gives him some solid advice on how to actually pass the martial arts exam. During the chat, Fanning's sister shows up and fangirls over Wang, since he's basically a legend. Later, when Fanning is alone and getting famous in the fighting scene, he decides to pop the pills. The system instantly dumps over 2 million points on him, and he starts feeling a steady, controlled surge of power. He keeps it in check, so his body doesn't get fried by all that raw energy. When he gets back to school, Fanning talks to his friends about the upcoming exam. One friend says he has a machine that measures strength and asks Fanning if he wants to give it a go. He thinks Fanning might actually be high level now. Fanning agrees, thinking it's a good way to see how much of a beast he's actually become. When he compares his stats, he's shocked to see his power level is between 108 and 114, which is wild. Just for context, the smartest kid in class is only sitting at a level 90. Finally, the big exam day arrives, and the whole squad heads over to the testing site. The instructors say everyone has to step into special pods that measure their power through blood energy. Groups go in one by one trying to beat the minimum score of 112 to move on. When it's one of Fanning's buddies' turn, everyone stares as the machine starts doing its thing. His level blows past 140, leaving the whole room speechless. After the tests, Fanning and his crew celebrate their passing scores. Though the friend with the machine feels a bit salty, thinking Fanning was hiding his true power the whole time. Still, they both promise to be rivals once they get into one of the top universities. According to the local talk later, Fanning calls Wang to ask for some pro training tips, and the master tells him to meet up at a public gym. When he gets there, he sees Wang is looking after a young girl. He's curious about her, and Wang explains that she is actually his old master's daughter. Right then, a flashback shows how Wang's teacher sacrificed himself to save a whole city from destruction, leaving Wang in a tight spot with the job of keeping the little girl safe. Back in the now, Fanning starts training with Wang, who notices the kid's body has seriously improved thanks to all those pills. He sees that his moves are way faster, his tank is bigger, and his energy control is actually becoming precise. After watching him work, Wang gives him some advice on which colleges he should look at. He even suggests his own school, where Fanning could really level up his martial arts game quickly. As time passes, Fanning gets ready to say goodbye to his family. He knows he has to leave for uni, so he hops on a train to start his new life. Meanwhile, Wang stays with the girl, and it's pretty clear she is still worried about her missing dad, since he got trapped in a different dimension during his big sacrifice. To cheer her up, Wang promises he will find a way to break him out and bring him home. When Fanning finally makes it to Wang's university, he finds himself staring at a massive gate. It's like 100 meters tall, and so huge it makes him feel like a total bug. It feels like the gate itself is daring him to walk through. For a second, he's actually pretty scared. But before he can chicken out, a guy named Qin shows up, says he's a friend of Wang and is there to give him a warm welcome. Qin, who's basically a big deal at the university, gives our guy the once-over and decides to drop some unsolicited wisdom. His advice sounds pretty basic, but it actually hits pretty hard when he tells Fanning not to let a glorified piece of scrap metal like a giant gate hurt his feelings. Qin reminds him that at the end of the day, it's just a door, a massive one. Sure, but it's still just a door. Hearing that, Fanning realizes that overthinking a literal entrance is a total waste of his brain power, especially since his goals are way more important than any physical hurdle inside this overpriced training camp. The place is huge, chaotic, and smells like desperate ambition. Everyone there is trying to flex on each other in this cutthroat competition. The desperation is real when some dad tries to bribe his way into a good spot for his son using a fat donation. Turns out the school system doesn't care how deep your daddy's pockets are. The rejection is ice cold. They told him that money can't buy actual talent. Since the kid's skills were basically non-existent, They informed the dad that if he wanted special treatment, he'd have to pay a massive lack of talent tax, proving that cash doesn't beat class. Money is great, but it's not a substitute for being good. Meanwhile, Fanning is actually having some decent luck. His division pulled the highest score of the year, and honestly, the highest in the school's entire history. The receptionist is so floored by his stats that she immediately hands him the keys to a prime dorm room in the fancy part of campus. With that win, Fanning starts his university life without any immediate disasters. Right after he unpacks his bags, he hears a knock at the door. It's his neighbor Fu, a blonde guy who lives across the hall and looks like he tries too hard. They become fast friends, and Fu explains they have to show up for some mandatory event at the university's combat field today. When the time comes, they follow the herd of students to the designated beatdown zone. It becomes pretty obvious that this isn't a welcome to the family speech, but a very blunt warning about their new brutal reality. Forget the warm fuzzies. The instructors make it clear that everyone needs to bring their A-game or get out. This isn't a community college, it's a high-stakes gladiator factory for elite martial artists. Cracking the books isn't enough. You have to fight, bleed, and grind until you're the last one standing. The teachers then start doing their grand introductions. They're a colorful bunch of specialists who look like they enjoy violence a bit too much. With names like Tang Feng and Chunna, these masters have such an intense vibe that everyone suddenly forgets how to breathe. There was also one teacher who looked like he was just there for the benefits, but he still had the job of showing everyone why internal energy actually matters. Each instructor flares their Kai aura, showing off power levels that are honestly just insulting. The students are told that they can unlock this power too if they don't quit first. Fanning flips his Kai switch on without breaking a single sweat. His energy is so much louder than anyone else's that he basically becomes the center of attention instantly. He's a rare breed who's maxed out both his energy and his physical stats. But he's not the only one showing off his talent today. Fu is also holding his own under the crushing pressure of the test. The two of them are so cocky they start doing ridiculous poses, while Qin watches them like a disappointed parent from the sidelines. Realizing these two are the main characters of this circus, Qin decides to keep a very close eye on them. Just as things get heated, the university director shows up and everyone freezes like they're playing a game of statues. His presence is so heavy, it literally sucks the air out of the room and shuts everyone up. Even the scary instructors bow down like he's the final boss. The director, who just goes by W, mentions he's been running this asylum for over 50 years. He brags about the legendary warriors the school has produced, but he makes one point that Fanning actually takes to heart. A real martial artist only grows when they're constantly struggling and hunting for a way to get better. After the pep talk, an instructor announces that a student Hunger Games is starting very soon. That's when Fanning realizes his new classmates aren't friends, they're just obstacles with names. Everyone is going to be clawing their way to the top for a scrap of recognition. Being too confident is a great way to get punched, so everyone needs to stay paranoid. The students are moved to a special building where Tang Fong starts explaining the rules of the house. There are 9 floors, but the rookies are capped at the 4th floor, so that's the current target for everyone. While he's talking, the other teachers are watching the kids on monitors like it's a reality TV show. As soon as the doors open, the place turns into an absolute mosh pit of teenagers. It's a chaotic mess of running and shoving as everyone tries to reach the top first. Fu decides to turn the whole thing into a high-stakes race against Fanning. First person to hit the 4th floor gets the bragging rights. The two of them sprint up the stairs, leaving their slower classmates in the dust. When they hit the 2nd floor, things get a little weird. Chen Yunchai helps a girl who tripped, but instead of saying thanks, the girl tries to sucker punch her for the help. Luckily, Zizhenman steps in to stop the petty drama. Meanwhile, Fu doesn't have time for feelings and keeps charging ahead. He's busy bulldozing anyone in his way because he really wants that win. Eventually, the students make it to a giant, sterile white hall. Fanning looks around and feels pretty let down because he expected to see legendary prodigies with insane skills. Instead, he just sees a room full of average disappointments. He starts talking to himself about Wang, complaining that he knows what a real warrior actually looks like. He expected everyone else here to be on that level, but clearly the bar was lower than he thought. The teachers listening in on the mics are pretty annoyed by his massive ego. They decide to humble him with a surprise challenge. They announce that anyone who can take down Fanning will get a massive point bounty, and even just surviving 20 minutes against him pays out a decent reward. It's basically a bounty on his head. The news spreads, and suddenly everyone is teaming up to jump him. Fu hesitates for a second, wondering if he should join the mob or actually be a good friend. He decides to stick with Fanning and fight off the horde. The brawl starts, and they actually do okay for a minute. But Fu gets folded and taken out, leaving Fanning to deal with the entire room alone. Despite being completely outnumbered, he keeps swinging with an intensity that honestly scares people. This performance gets the teachers digging into his file to see who he actually is. They're shocked to find out he's only been a fighter for a hot minute. But his physical energy and bone strength are way too high for a rookie who just walked through the front door. Plus, his combat IQ is surprisingly not terrible. When they check his family tree, it's just boring normal people with zero history of martial arts, which makes no sense. After looking at the data, the teachers come to a single conclusion. The guy responsible for turning Fanning into a monster must be Wang. They figure Wang's coaching is the only reason he's this good, and they expect the master to hit level 6 power very soon. In this world, there are 9 levels you need to hit if you want anyone to respect your name. Hitting level 6 is a massive achievement, and while the teachers are gossiping, Fanning is still busy fighting. As the timer ticks down, it's clear that his stamina is basically infinite. He proves he can take whatever the group throws at him. He finishes the challenge like a boss, thanks to being both smart and strong. He hit every goal without even breaking a sweat. Nobody knew he cheated a little by using one of his special pills to get a temporary power boost. That sudden burst of energy helped him steamroll the competition at the perfect time. When the dust settles, he's the winner, and the teachers are completely baffled. They didn't think a new kid could win that challenge with so little effort. Fanning was exceptional, and by the next day, the whole school was looking at him like he was a ticking time bomb. Then a big announcement was dropped. Every first-year student needs to pick a personal tutor. The goal is to get specialized training based on how they want to fight. Fanning listens to the options and starts weighing his choices. His eyes eventually land on Woody's station as he checks out the potential mentors. The short-haired woman from the intro was standing there with the rest of the faculty. She gives him a serious look and tells him that if he picks her, she'll give him all the gear and training he needs to be the best. She mentions she also came from a nothing family, so she knows exactly what he's going through. Some students were whispering that because they actually understand the struggle, the ones who grew up in the trenches are the ones most likely to pop off. Then you've got Rubio, Fang's buddy, who basically grew up in a gated community with a silver spoon. Rubio's old man was a level 5 martial arts master, which meant the kid could have just stayed home on his couch instead of even bothering with this university. Woody kept lecturing with a bunch of examples, eventually pointing out that Hanian Yang was in the same boat as Feng, coming from a family with zero clout. In this world, having no connections or cash is a one-way ticket to the struggle bus, since you can't just buy your way to the top. But the teacher promised she'd mold him into a weapon, whether he liked it or not. If Robles was going to learn alongside Feng, she was convinced Woody was the only real choice and jumped on the offer. Right then, another teacher with hair long enough for a shampoo commercial walked up and told Woody to keep a sharp eye on Feng. He casually mentioned that her last 2-star pupils ended up in accidents before they could even get their diplomas. That little news flash terrified Feng, making him wish he'd read the fine print before signing his life away. While he was busy having an existential crisis, a kid with blue hair wandered over. This was Sos Yumi. He walked up with way too much confidence and announced he was joining the squad too. Wo was actually impressed, thinking to herself that she respected someone with that much of a death wish. So she took him under her wing. Later on, Feng's blonde friend was gossiping about Professor W, saying she's a total nightmare who treats her students like literal punching bags. Feng wasn't even shocked. He knew he'd already stepped into the trap and figured he'd just have to survive whatever hell she planned for Monday. The first thing Woody taught him was a move designed to make his nerves and bones feel like they were made of steel. She explained the theory with an eerie calmness and then made him drill it for hours on end. Feng went full try-hard and actually managed to pull off the skill. Riding that high, he thanked her and started babbling about how awesome it felt to be powerful. He then asked for those performance-enhancing pills so he could keep the momentum going. But the teacher shut him down, telling him that those pills aren't gummy bears and she isn't a candy store. She made it clear her supply wasn't exactly infinite. If he wanted the good stuff, he'd have to actually survive her upcoming challenges. After that, she basically booted him out of the room. Fang was left standing there confused, wondering why she went from mentor to drill sergeant in 3 seconds. Once he was gone, the teacher hopped on a call with someone. Turns out she was in the middle of a messy divorce with her ex, which probably explains the attitude, or maybe her attitude is exactly why the guy left in the first place. The next day, Feng and Sao met up with Professor W again. This time, she decided to flex with a technique that looked absolutely terrifying. It was a coordinated strike, using the whole body to dump every ounce of power into one single point. It was meant to punch through solid objects, and to prove it, she put a massive hole in the wall with a casual punch. Feng and Sao were staring with their jaws on the floor. Feng tried to copy her and immediately ended up nearly snapping his own leg. The teacher told him he'd need some reinforced boots if he wanted to keep his limbs and sent him to the shop. Feng wandered over to the supply area, wondering if every teacher in this place was a secret psychopath. He met a guy named Le Shangshen, who showed him the mandatory "don't break your legs" footwear. Feng almost had a heart attack when he saw the price tag. They were 50 credits, and he didn't exactly have a coupon. He paid up. The next day, it was time for group training. They went to the gym to use the ring, but of course, someone else was already squatting in their spot. So they decided to kill some time while they waited their turn. Suddenly, a random student recognized Feng and challenged him to a scrap. Feng didn't back down and accepted the fight. His opponent was a rank 3 student who clearly had a grudge. In the first round, Feng ate 3 massive hits and hit the floor pretty fast. But by the second round, he'd already downloaded his opponent's entire move set. He dodged every swing and at the perfect moment, launched a crazy aerial counterattack that combined all his new skills. The hit was so clean it knocked the guy out cold, leaving the rest of the gym in total silence. But winning that fight cost him almost all his energy. Feng was basically running on fumes. Seeing him weak, another long-haired student tried to swoop in for an easy win. He thought he could just finish off a tired guy and look like a hero. But Professor W saw right through his pathetic plan and shut him down before he could move. She told him he was just acting out of jealousy because he wasn't even half as good as Feng. The room got awkward real fast after that verbal beatdown. Wang saw the drama unfolding and decided he needed to step in. He told the long-haired bully that if he had a problem with Feng, he'd have to answer to Wang first, which ended that conversation quickly. The fight was cancelled, and Feng finally got a chance to catch his breath. Later on, Feng and Wang went out to grab some dinner. While they were eating, Wang mentioned something that sounded like a massive opportunity. There was a huge televised tournament coming up soon. He wanted Feng to become a household name, saying this was the perfect stage to show the world that he wasn't just some lucky rookie. Meanwhile, the school staff gathered Feng and his friends in a big meeting room. They briefed them on an upcoming event that promised fat rewards and top-tier materials to buff their stats. The group was hyped and decided to go into beast mode with their training to get ready. Feng was picked to square off against 3 powerhouse warriors they'd actually beaten before. These warriors realized Feng was a literal tank, so they decided to push the entire class to their breaking points. Despite the pain, Feng didn't quit and kept throwing hands with everything he had left. He was obsessed with being the best, so he stayed on the grind every single day. A few days later, the teacher handed him a rare book filled with advanced dagger techniques. If he could learn these, he'd be practically untouchable in a close fight. He studied those pages like his life depended on it and trained until he could do the moves in his sleep. When the tournament day finally rolled around, the hype was through the roof. The host started laying out the rules for everyone. The whole thing was a bracket just for the first-year students. While they were waiting, Feng's little sister showed up with a friend in tow. They couldn't stop talking about how much they admired Wang's skills. Hearing that gave Feng a second wind, and he vowed to win the whole thing just to make his sister and Wang proud. Suddenly, this guy named Laddie popped out of nowhere. He was trying to catch the whole thing on camera for his online stream. He asked Feng if he could follow his team around, thinking their matches would probably go viral. The tournament officially kicked off on the main stage. Captains from 4 different schools marched out for the draw. They had to pick random balls to figure out who was fighting whom. The matchups were decided seconds before they actually started. The director of Fang's school stepped up. He gave an intense speech about how a real fighter doesn't have room for fear. He claimed that to win, you have to be completely locked into the present moment. Everyone was vibing with the speech as the first match started with Han Shu, the white-haired kid. He was facing off against Sunan Minju, a tall guy with a spear and a very long ponytail. The fight was a total slugfest and looked like a draw for a while. Sunan looked like he was winning, but Kang pulled a victory out of thin air with a secret move. The director's bodyguards started getting twitchy. They were worried that Feng's team wouldn't be able to handle Han Shu's squad, but the director told them to chill because he believed in his rookies. He knew they had the talent to pull off an upset that would shock the world. The matches kept coming, and every student was fighting like they had a point to prove. The energy was so high that it seemed like half the country was watching the stream. Little kids in the crowd were already dreaming of becoming fighters and enrolling in the university one day. Then after a few more brawls, the team moved into the next bracket. Now it was finally Fang Ping's turn, and his team stepped up to the ring ready to do some damage. As the captain, Feng knew he had to be the first one to set the tone. His opponent was the other team's captain, rocking a bright yellow uniform and getting stared down by Feng's sister. The whole arena was holding its breath because everyone knew this was going to be a tough one, but Feng gave his sister a look, telling her that he's got this in the bag. He wasn't just her big brother, he was a warrior, and the crowd was buzzing with excitement, placing bets and arguing about who would win. The tension was even reaching Fang Ping's parents back at home. His dad had been working double shifts and begged his boss to let him leave early to catch the match. He didn't want to miss his son becoming a legend on live television. He and his wife were glued to the screen, probably more nervous than Feng himself. Back at the arena, the announcers were hyping up Fang Ping, talking about his insane scores and how he crushed every test. The audience was whispering, shocked that a kid this young could be this dangerous. Most people didn't think he'd actually make it past the qualifiers. The fight started, and both guys had their weapons out and were looking for an opening. Feng moved like a blur, sidestepping attacks, as if the other guy was moving in slow motion. Every move he made was surgical, and he put his opponent down before the guy even knew what hit him. The crowd was stunned into silence for a second because of how fast it ended. But there was no time to celebrate because Rubio was up next and he was itching for a fight. He was ready to keep the streak alive. Since Feng won, he had to stay in the ring for the next challenger. There was zero time to grab a water break. The yellow team was scrambling to regroup. Turns out the guy Feng just folded wasn't even their best fighter, just a warm-up. The real captain of the yellow team was still waiting in the wings. Fang Ping was running on empty after that last scrap, so he popped a pill to keep from passing out. Watching every move Feng made and trying to find a hole in his defense, realizing he had a real problem on his hands. He knew the recovery wouldn't be instant, so he gave his team some very blunt orders. He told the next fighter to go for the throat and not give the other guy a single second to breathe. Fang took a shaky breath. He knew if the pressure stayed on before his meds kicked in, he was basically cooked. But then the plot armor kicked in and he recharged in 20 seconds, which was way faster than anyone expected. The yellow team captain was visibly rattled by the quick recovery, so he sent in his heavy hitter with a warning to watch out for Fang's nasty dagger skills. Fang realized his system was basically a cheat code for healing, and his confidence shot through the roof. The next guy was quick and annoying, but Fang danced around the low hits like he was in a music video. Then he got cocky and ate a massive kick to the ribs that sent him flying back toward the front row. Instead of crying about it, Fang fired back with a kick that had some serious, get-lost energy, landing his rival face first on the mat. The arena went wild, and Fang's family was probably screaming at the TV back home. But the drama wasn't quite over yet. The yellow team captain saw his team folding and decided to handle things personally. He lunged at Fang before he could even reset his stance, but the protagonist barely slipped away. Realizing this boss fight was actually serious, he flexed his kai and floated into the air, pulling off a high-level stunt that first-years aren't supposed to know. Even as a rookie, Fang was out here doing homework that takes most people years to master. He popped another performance enhancer and went full aggro. The vibe in the arena changed as their power levels started clashing like a storm. It was a total light show that left the crowd absolutely speechless. Nobody had ever seen a student match look this much like a professional war. The yellow captain finally admitted Fang was a threat and decided to stop holding back. He flexed so hard his shirt literally exploded, and his aura started looking like a very hangry tiger. Now the real fight was actually starting. Fang swung for the fences, but the dude was basically a brick wall at this point. So Fang countered with his own blue bird aura to try and even the playing field. They both took a second to breathe and stare each other down. The fans were biting their nails, terrified for their guy but impressed by the rival's grit. Neither of them was willing to tap out. They went back at it, trading blows that sounded like small explosions. The sound of fist hitting meat echoed through the whole building. And somehow, both of them stayed upright after getting hit by what felt like trucks. The judges had to get into a huddle to figure out who actually won this mess. Both kids fought like absolute legends, but they couldn't ignore Fang's late-game hustle. After checking the tape, they officially handed the win to Fang Ping. His rival actually took the loss well and gave him a respectful nod. In the stands, Fang's sister was basically losing her voice from cheering, while his parents were celebrating in their living room, but the grind never stops. Fang needed to reload his mana, so he swallowed another pill. The next sacrificial lamb from the yellow team stepped up to try his luck. The audience was locked in at this point. They finally understood that Fang was built differently than the average student. His stats were just off the charts in every category. Meanwhile, Wang and his emo-head partner were off on some shady mission, clearing rooms and looking for trouble. They flared their auras, knowing they were about to steamroll whatever was behind the next door. Back at the main event, the commentators started hyping up the final bracket. The yellow team was officially sent packing, and the remaining kids got a quick break before the next round of violence. One of the directors started a speech about honor, but everyone was just waiting for more fighting. The crowd was hanging on every word though. The scoreboard showed that only 6 teams were left standing. The director told them to keep their heads in the game. Since the next phase was going to be a bloodbath, Fang's squad huddled up to talk shop. The coach dropped the bomb that only 5 of them could actually go out for the next round. Fang was annoyed by the cap, and his friends had to explain it was basically for his own safety. The other team leaders were already scouting them, especially the one guy who hadn't even shown his true power. The teacher had to step in just to keep everyone from brawling in the hallway. A scout warned them that the red team leader was sandbagging and hiding his real level to lure them in. He suggested they watch the other matches closely to see what the rivals were actually packing. Fang took notes while planning his attack, even though he just wanted to punch something immediately. His team reminded him that there's no I in team and to let them do their jobs. Even though his instinct was to 1v5 the whole bracket, Fang eventually agreed to the plan. The blonde guy gave him a supportive slap on the back, promising they wouldn't let him down. With a fresh plan, the squad headed back out to the arena. Fang's sister was looking around, wondering where her brother went, while the red team leader, Hanning Shu, decided it didn't matter if Fang was there or not. He only cared about winning, no matter who he had to steamroll to get there. The next fight was called, and Rubio was first up, looking like he had something to prove. He did a flashy spear spin for the fans, shouting that he was going to take Hanning Shu's head and make his family famous. The crowd loved the trash talk, even if half of them thought he was about to get wrecked. Fang was just chilling by the rail, thinking about prank calling Rubio, but the fight started before he could. The first match was finally happening. Sayasumi stepped into the ring first, and right away she realized she was in for a very bad time. Her opponent was a literal tank, clearly sent in by the red team just to tire her out for the later rounds. The dude had an annoying defense that forced her to just keep dodging and wasting her energy. But then she caught him slipping and landed a perfectly timed punch right to his sensitive bits. He folded like a lawn chair, but Seo ended up with a broken arm for her trouble and got rushed to the dock. Fang was pretty annoyed by how brutal the strategy was, but they were too deep into the bracket to quit now. Now everything was on Rubio's shoulders. The buddy was finally getting his wish to fight the main villain, Hanning. It turned into a bloodbath in about 3 seconds. Hanning was hitting him so hard that Rubio started coughing up a lung on the stage. But Rubio has zero chill and refused to stay down. He pulled out a mystical move called the Golden Dragon Strike, which looked like something out of a movie. Hanning dodged it like it was nothing. The blast was so big that a teacher had to block the shockwave from the fans. That's when things got messy. Using the smoke as cover, Rubio closed the gap and tagged Hanning with a golden punch to the face. The room went silent when they saw Hanning actually bleeding for once. Hanning was furious about getting touched and pulled out his sword to end it for real. But the master called the match before someone actually died. Hanning technically won, but he looked like a sore loser. Rubio was happy just because he messed up the guy's face. Next up was Yang Xioma. She was a pink-haired bundle of aggression who fought like she had a permanent grudge against everyone. The other guy tried the same low blow she used earlier. But Hanning was ready for it this time and blocked the hit. So Yang just headbutted him instead, because why not? She managed to stab him in the shoulder, and even though she was in pain, she headbutted him again to finish the job. But she eventually gassed out, and her team had to carry her off the stage. The red team sent in a fresh fighter, while Hanning got patched up on the sidelines. Fang stepped in and cleared the next two guys like he was playing on easy mode. He looked at his teacher with a "look what you made me do" face, still mad he was benched earlier. Professor Wo checked in on him in the med bay, saying Fang was way sneakier than he looked, comparing his brain to a very hairy lion. They started drawing up a plan for the next round. This time Fang got to pick the roster and tell everyone how to fight. Rubio was down immediately, and a shy girl from the other squad also stepped up to help out. The teachers were worried she'd fold under the pressure, but Fang knew she had that dog in her and told them to let her play. He told her to forget about being nice and just be a menace. The next bell would show what she was actually capable of. Meanwhile, a poll on the big screen showed that 90% of the audience thought they were going to get smoked, which was a great mood setter. The next guy from Fang's squad was a scrawny kid with power gloves who went right for the big guy, tossing him aside just to claw back some dignity for the red team. He moved like a fly, but the big guy swatted him away with a literal fireball, making things look pretty grim for the underdogs. Next up on the chopping block was Yunchai. She politely suggested her rival just quit, but the human tank attacked with everything he had. He launched her across the room until both were out cold. It was a coin toss, but Yunchai woke up first and stole the point. Even while losing, she managed to wreck the other guy, mostly thanks to a 200 credit pill she popped beforehand. Fang thought it was a total waste of cash, but hey, a win is a win. The next fighter was the same jerk who had bullied Fang's friends in the first round. The dude was strong, but Yunchai went into beast mode with an 18-strike combo that was surprisingly surgical. The red team guy finally got a grip on her leg and basically threw her out like trash. The violence got so out of hand that Fang had to jump in just to keep his ally from being deleted. Finally, the man himself, Fang Ping, stepped in and the opponent lunged. Fang didn't even break a sweat while ending that guy's whole career in a heartbeat. Annoyed by the amateur hour, Fang called out the red team's boss, Hanning Shu, making the vibe in the room turn ice cold. Fang flared his blue aura and grabbed his spear, but Hanning ghosted him and teleported behind for a cheap shot. It looked like game over for Fang, but he stood back up like a horror movie villain. Even Yang Yin Wang was watching from the sidelines, looking impressed. The medical bay staff were even glued to the monitors, completely shocked by the grit. While Fang was busy hunting for his teacher in some weird shadow dimension, his long-haired buddy figured his energy was just a pill-induced fever dream. In reality, it was just his system's cheat codes working overtime, and a very tilted Hanning tried to swing again. Fang just shrugged it off and let his true violet aura shine like a neon sign. Fang Ping went to work, leaving Hanning bleeding on the floor and rethinking his life as a supposed prodigy. Hanning finally realized he was way out of his league. Fang's system put him into a weird combat trance, giving him a moment to reflect on all the ways he could win. He fixed his spear and recycled the move Professor W taught him, jumping back into the fray with a second wind. He caught Hanning off guard, who couldn't believe this kid had the stamina of a marathon runner on espresso. Fang started spamming every technique he'd seen in the tournament, and the faculty was floored by how fast he was stealing moves. The fight got spicy, but Fang landed the final blow on Hanning, clutching the win for his team right when it mattered. His squad went nuts with the celebrations, and the crowd was left staring in total disbelief. The scoreboard splashed their victory across the screen for everyone to see. As the replay rolled, the whole arena started chanting Fang's name like he was a rock star. Back in his room later, Fang actually did some thinking. He knew that without his crew, Hanning would have probably used him as a floor mat. Everyone saw him as a god, but he knew his game still had some major holes in it. He realized he was still miles away from being the final boss of this world. So he decided to lock in and train even harder, determined to stop being just good enough. He wanted to lead his friends for real, to be the guy everyone leans on when things get hairy. When he finally linked up with his team and sister, she started whining about the dorms being trash and wanting to stay far away from home. Another guy was salty about his roommate situation too. Since life isn't fair, someone suggested they hand out the good rooms based on how hard people can punch. But a friend pointed out that just means they all need to stop being lazy or they'll end up in the basement. They all made a pact to keep grinding so they wouldn't end up as background characters. Meanwhile, the chubby streamer kid got a call that would probably change his tax bracket. Some big shot TV exec wanted the tournament footage and promised he wouldn't totally rip him off. But then the antagonist showed up with a smug grin, demanding a cut of the action for using his face. He threatened to sue the streamer into oblivion if he didn't get his licensing fees. They hashed out a deal, and the kid ran off to cash his first real paycheck. The rest of the squad met up with Fang, just glad they all had their original limbs after that absolute war. Shortly after, the whole group hopped on a train to head back to reality. On the ride, his sister checked the latest power rankings in the paper to see where he landed. Surprisingly, Fang wasn't at the very top of the list. His friends were shocked, but he reminded them that there were 100,000 kids in this thing. Being anywhere near the top was already a miracle. He jumped over 60,000 spots, and honestly, he wasn't sweating the small stuff. What mattered was that he hit level 2 yesterday, and his friends were sure he'd be a god by next week. They mentioned some legendary fighter, but Fang had a feeling the dude was already stalking them. The train's intercom buzzed, telling them they were almost back at their stop. When they got off, the group wanted a cab, but Fang decided to walk and soak it in. He wanted to enjoy the view after working so hard, even if his sister thought the city was boring. Suddenly, a crowd recognized him as the freshman champ and started swarming for autographs. Fang played the humble hero and signed a few napkins with a giant grin on his face. The next morning, he woke up and realized he'd already hit level 3. But hitting level 4 was going to cost 100 million points, which is a lot of grinding. He started prepping for the long haul, but then some agent showed up with some crazy news. Because he caught a criminal and won the trophy, the city was gifting him a mansion. Fang felt a little guilty and thought Wang should get a piece since he did the heavy lifting. The agent said it was all Wang's idea, and the master confirmed it over the phone. So Fang moved his family into a massive palace, and they were all basically vibrating with excitement. The house was towering, and his sister was so shocked she forgot to breathe for a second. She immediately ran off to claim the biggest room before anyone else could. As the new year rolled in, everyone was celebrating their wins in their own weird ways. Some were training, while Professor Wu was busy drowning some pretty dark memories. Fang's family was living the dream in the new pad, toasting to their good fortune. Vacation ended way too fast, and Fang headed back to school to brag about his gains. His buddies had hit level 2 and were ready to keep the grind alive. Then he got a random call, inviting him to a meetup with Wang in the big city. Fang didn't even hesitate to say yes to that invitation. He really wanted to see how he stacked up against a pro in a real environment. He had no clue that Wang had actually set the whole thing up as a secret test. They rolled into Nangu, which is basically the Vegas of university cities. Important people were everywhere, scouting for the next big weapon to use in the wars. Wang showed up with a smirk and challenged him to a friendly sparring match. Fang was suspicious until he saw the prize pool included rare pills that could buff his whole team. They needed the power-up because the local monsters were starting to get really bold lately. Fang tried to call his lion mane mentor, but the guy basically told him to grow up and handle it. Fang just sighed, realizing he was on his own for this one. Wang pumped up his squad, reminding them he was the top dog and they better not embarrass him. His allies didn't dare argue with the strongest guy in the room. By the afternoon, Fang's team was deep in a strategy huddle trying to find a way to win. A professor showed up with a box of meds, and dropped the news that his mentor's daughter was starting school soon. Wang came back to talk some more trash while a teacher moved the meeting elsewhere. Wang told his class they had to fight for their lives, but one kid thought it was just a joke. That really ticked off Hang, who reminded them he was the only thing standing between them and death. The director backed him up, saying that if they lost to Fang, most of them were getting expelled. Talk about a stressful way to start a Monday morning. The first match kicked off with Fang's buddy showing off some pretty decent combat skills. The crowd was already impressed before the main event even started. When Fang stepped out, the whole place started whispering about the kid who dominated the last tournament. Some guys in expensive suits were taking notes on his footwork and speed. One girl with a ponytail and a spear tried to jump him with a violet aura, but he just laughed at her. He dodged her like a fly and started roasting her about her choice in boyfriends, which, as you can imagine, didn't really help her calm down. He finally got bored and punched her in the gut, ending the fight and sending her running off in shame. The next victim was a massive wall of meat with grey hair. The crowd was actively praying for Fang's downfall, but he didn't care. He flared that blue aura, pulled out some fancy moves and folded the guy. The big bosses in the suits noticed Fang was burning through power pills at a scary prodigy-level speed. Then the next gladiator stepped into the arena. This kid was decked out in black with hair way too long for combat. Supposedly the second best fighter in Wang's entire school. Despite the hype around this guy, Fang Ping looked bored. He tossed his spear to his buddies, claiming these losers weren't worth the effort of using it. The crowd laughed, the opponent just smirked, and they both agreed to settle this with a good old-fashioned fistfight. They started trading hits so fast the air pressure alone was probably giving the front row whiplash. It didn't take long for blood to start painting the floor. The duel turned nasty, but Fang Ping had zero interest in losing. Wang watched from the sidelines, casually critiquing his buddy's talent. He called him a top-tier freak, right as Fang started spamming kicks and some weird technique that looked like a bird. The other guy was no slouch though, dodging like a ninja and slowly pushing Fang into a corner. Fang tried to slip a heavy double strike, but ate the hit instead. It was a brutal shot, but he stayed on his feet, looked at the guy like he owed him money and swung back. The exchange got so intense and loud that the audience basically couldn't see anything but a blur of violence. Their auras were clashing so hard the ground was literally vibrating under everyone's feet. The flashy lights and sound effects had the spectators frozen like deer in headlights. The directors started panicking, thinking they should probably call it a draw before someone actually exploded. But before they could stop the fun, Fang Ping went into a total trance, his eyes glowing like high beams. He lunged twice with enough power to jumpstart a dead planet. He landed a couple of heavy shots and finished with a headbutt that definitely left a mark on Huan Pin. Before Huan could even blink, Fang kicked him straight in the face and sent him flying out of the ring. The entire stadium went dead silent. The only sound was Fang's heavy breathing until Wang stepped in to say the party was over. Fang looked a bit dazed but nodded and walked back to his crew. He told them to get it together and stop making the school look bad. That little speech actually worked, making the other students realize they needed to grind harder just to catch up to him. Afterward, Fang met Wang's team, who tried to recruit him for the Navy and handed him a high-level training manual. Now he was actually feeling motivated for once. The next day, Fang went looking for a blue-haired warrior friend of Wang's. He got a weird call on the way, but he wasn't in the mood for small talk and just hung up on them. He found the guy absolutely bodying every student in sight without breaking a single sweat. It was a total massacre, and everyone watching was just wondering what they were doing with their lives. Then things got spicy when Selly showed up and challenged the blue-haired dude. Fang just pulled up a seat to watch the show. The power gap was honestly embarrassing. Fang was sitting at level 3, while the other guy was barely a level 2. The warrior didn't even bother with his gear and just ate hits like they were snacks. He didn't even flinch. Ray tried to use Fang's fame to scam some students into paying for lessons. He almost got away with it until Professor Woe appeared out of nowhere and knocked him into next Tuesday. She dragged Fang away to give him the "what it means to be level 3" talk. She explained that a top-tier fighter at this stage is basically 10 times stronger than a regular one. She offered him a special training deal, but of course, it wasn't free. She sent him to the front desk, where some guy was waiting to take 50 of his hard-earned credits for supplies. Fang hated his life but paid the bill anyway. He sat in a room, focused his energy, and let out an aura so big it actually made the professor look twice. The master walked out grinning because Fang was officially a level 3 rookie, though the professor just walked away without saying a word. Meanwhile, the director was telling everyone to enjoy the peace while it lasts, because things were about to get ugly. Fang was just wandering around when he ran into Yunchai. They heard the exploration teams were finally coming back from the front lines. But when they got to the gate, it looked like a scene from a horror movie. Dead students in bags and a teacher who was now one arm lighter than before. Everyone was freaking out trying to figure out what went wrong. Professor Gu told everyone to pipe down and realized that they needed to get strong or die. Most of the staff made it out, but the vibe was definitely ruined. The director gave a speech, and Fang could tell that something massive was looming on the horizon. They held a funeral for the fallen teacher, which was a total bummer, but it made Fang realize he needed to level up fast. Later, an old-timer explained that the teacher died near a 700-year-old portal that spits out level 9 monsters that can eat nukes for breakfast. Basically, if those things get bored, humanity is toast. The portal is falling apart, and there are entrances out there that are literally 12 times bigger than the entire Earth. Also, those fancy pills everyone loves, yeah, they come from monster parts found in those caves. The professor told them to get their affairs in order. Professor Wo offered Fang a mission to earn some gear since he was officially broke again. The guy was a total jerk and actually tried to fight him. After the delivery, Rubio spilled the tea on why the professor was so miserable all the time. The mission was simple: deliver a letter like a glorified mailman. Turns out she and her ex used to have a daughter they absolutely doted on. He tried to get his friends to help because he was terrified of the professor's ex-husband. She was a prodigy, so they took her into the cave to show her the family business. But they ran into a psycho who beat the poor girl to death right in front of them. The professor couldn't look at her husband after that, so she called it quits on the marriage. That's why she's a drill sergeant from hell now. She's got some serious trauma to work through. Fang Ping finally realized the cave wasn't just a place to get loot. He decided he needed to be ready for the meat grinder before he stepped foot inside. He went back to the training room, hit level 3 for real, and started focusing his power. Professor Wo was watching him like a hawk, analyzing every single move he made. The staff was amazed to see him using a divine technique that most people only see in legends. Fang stayed locked in, using the system to balance his energy until he was perfectly centered. He walked out of there as a peak level 3 fighter, ready for anything. He spent the next few days training outside to sharpen his instincts. He even went back to the shop to return his spear and bragged about how excited he was. Finally, the day of the suicide mission arrived. A bunch of students were being led by the lion-maned teacher into the danger zone. They got a final lecture on how not to die, then hopped on a bus headed straight for the military base. The vibe on the bus was somewhere between a field trip and a funeral. When they got there, Fang noticed the guards were as strong as his teachers, which was a great confidence booster. The place was a massive, organized war machine, and they were the new meat. They walked into the command center to pick out which mission they wanted to fail at. There were even shops selling rare junk found in the deep dark. Fang stared at the cave entrance, which was built specifically to keep monsters inside. A guard told him that one wrong move meant he was coming home in a box. Fang took the hint and went back to the group to gear up. The professor gave them one rule: stay together or die alone. Everyone nodded like they actually understood the stakes as they walked toward the portal. The thing was huge, red, and the steps were covered in blood and broken weapons. Charming. Without overthinking it, Fang reached out and touched the portal, getting hit by a massive energy wave that definitely rattled his brain for a few seconds. He played it cool, telling the squad it was nothing to worry about. Apparently, the portal just has a very specific vibe that feels like an electric shock. An annoyed classmate shoved past him with a kick, and the rest of the group followed because they didn't really have a choice. Once they stepped through, Fang saw a world made of raw energy, featuring floating sidewalks that would give anyone with a fear of heights a heart attack. The professor explained that the cave was basically falling apart. It used to take 2 high-level warriors to keep this place from exploding. Now they need 10, which is a great sign that humanity is in for a very bad time. They still had to hit one more portal to get to the real death zone. The professor mentioned Wang's mentor died in there, but Wang was hell-bent on bringing the body home. After the second jump, they met General W, a tall guy with a majestic mane who was basically their tour guide to hell. Nobody argued with him, they just fell in line like good little soldiers. As they walked toward a human outpost, the general explained that things used to be chill here. But recently, the monster attacks had spiked by about 600%. If this city falls, the rest of the world is basically an all-you-can-eat buffet. The general's orders were pretty simple. Shut up, learn the layout, and do exactly what you're told. Zhang, a combat vet, led them through the front lines, pointing out that they don't even have time for funerals anymore. They just cover the bodies and keep moving. The lion-haired professor decided it was time to start the actual field trip. He split the group but gave Fang the special job of scouting ahead entirely by himself. Fang wasn't exactly thrilled, but his master told him he was the best of the best and needed to act like it. He reminded him that Wang used to do this solo all the time, usually while beating the hell out of level 5 enemies. Fang took the bait, even though he knew he was walking into a meat grinder for the first time. Of course, things went sideways immediately, and Fang got separated from the group. While wandering around, he sensed a masked warrior trying to sneak up on him. He didn't hesitate and swung his spear like a pro. The enemy was fast and pulled a vanishing act, but Fang wasn't falling for it. When the guy tried again, Fang landed a nasty blow that ended the fight, then stopped to check the corpse. The dude was a level 3, basically a humanish fighter, which was a little weird to process. He heard more voices and dove behind some rocks, realizing a whole squad was headed his way. He knew he couldn't hide forever because these things can sniff out energy like bloodhounds. The chase was on, and Fang went sprinting through a forest filled with massive trees and roots. He dodged flaming arrows like he was in an action movie, but right when he thought he was in the clear, he ran face first into a giant creature. It looked like a cat if that cat was the size of a truck and had glowing eyes, a Jinko beast. The bad guys caught up, but the cat decided they looked like snacks and pounced on them. Then the massive beast just sat down and started licking its paws like a regular house cat. Fang realized this monster wasn't looking for a fight, even though it looked terrifying. The creature totally ignored Fang and seemed way more interested in his luggage. It was staring at an energy stone he was carrying like a laser pointer. Fang played a game of fetch with the giant feline, throwing the stone to keep the kitty occupied. He started to sneak away, feeling pretty smart for outrunning a monster with a rock. But the cat wasn't finished. It trapped him and started treating him like a battery. It was draining his life force, but to the monster's surprise, Fang was basically an infinite power source. Thanks to his system, he had enough energy to power a city for a month. The giant cat eventually got its fill and just passed out right there. Meanwhile, a guy in a fancy suit was scouting the area, worried because there was a level 8 monster nearby. If Fang bumped into it without a plan, he'd be nothing more than a light snack. Fang caught his breath and had a light bulb moment. He decided to use the sleepy cat as a security guard. He lured the warriors toward the beast and let nature take its very violent course. Once they were wiped out, Fang looted all their weapons and armor like he was playing an RPG. But then he looked deeper into the woods and saw something truly nightmare-inducing. An entire army in white suits with weird symbols on their faces. Fang ran back to his pet cat and kept feeding it energy to keep it quiet and sleeping. He started appraising all the junk he'd stolen. Most of it was high-value loot that he could sell for a fortune. He spent hours on this grind, draining enemies and organizing his new inventory in the system. He realized he could finally level up. But it was going to cost 200 million points, which is a total rip-off. He told the cat he'd be back with more food later and headed out. Back at camp, his allies were busy arguing. Professor Woe was tearing into her ex about their daughter, but Fang's screaming cut the tension. A professor in a tiger suit jumped in to save him, taking out 2 of the guys chasing him. The last one got his arms snapped and couldn't even run away. They finally made it back to the safe city in one piece. Fang started dumping all his trophies, earning some serious respect before being sent to the nurse. He told them about the army and the weird symbol, which turned out to be a sunflower, much to everyone's horror. The big-brain professors got together to plan a strategy for the upcoming war. They started building a battalion while Fang talked shop with his buddies. The others thought this was a great chance to level up, but Fang knew they were basically walking into a blender. He was terrified for them, so he decided he'd just have to carry the whole team. He started chugging pills to buff his stats until he felt like he could punch through a mountain. One of the top brass gave him a shiny new weapon to replace his broken trash. The students were ready, and the teachers called for the heaviest hitters to step forward. Naturally, Fang was at the front of the line. He spent his last few minutes meditating, trying to reach a power level that wouldn't get him killed immediately. He met up with Wang's buddy, who was just about to hit level 4 himself. The commanders gave the final "Don't Die" speech and handed out some mid-battle snacks. The war started with a bang, literally, as everyone rushed toward the front lines. The allies watched the enemy from the walls, realizing the bad guys hadn't even brought their A-team yet. 3 high-ranking commanders were calling the shots from the other side. Kishin, an absolute powerhouse, was the first one sent in to clear the field. He let his aura loose, and the massacre officially began. The professors were showing off, but the students were struggling. Fang and Rubio teamed up to start clearing the enemies off the defensive walls. They were cutting through soldiers like they were made of paper. Then a guy with a scary red aura showed up, and the fun almost stopped. But the blue-haired kid jumped in at max speed and turned the enemy into a human shish kebab. The artillery was helping out, but then the enemy generals decided they'd seen enough. The allied masters started falling, and Fang wanted to help, but his crew wouldn't let him. Right as Professor Wu was about to get deleted, the director and the elders showed up to save the day. These guys were all high-ranking legends who started cleaning house immediately. They even brought the top students from the other schools along for the ride. The tide finally turned, even after the enemy leader lopped off a general's arm. The general just grew a new one because he's built like that, making the enemy realize they were in trouble. The director decided to end it with a bang, using his final move to vaporize the enemy general. The rest of the enemy army basically just fell apart. Without a boss to tell them what to do, they were just target practice. The survivors watched the bad guys run away, realizing the cost of the freedom they just won.